Okay, I'm back. Sorry. My phone went into sleep mode and I panicked. I have been trying to record this for quite a while. So if I'm a little disheveled on this one, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. It is what happens when we are in the midst of the semester. Okay. Anyway, so Shakespeare did create a lot of words for his time, but we use them every day, all the time. And a great book I highly suggest is actually called Made in America by Bill Bryson. And if you have ever read this book, it kind of takes a little bit of like getting into, but I'm telling you what, it's brilliant. Because when you think about when we have to create words and think of new things and how to express ourselves, you think like, how did we come up with this word, highway and freeway? Well, we had to make it up. We had to come up with it somehow because it didn't exist before highways and freeways. Like fast food. Fast food is a term we had to come up with to explain what this food is that we eat when we're on the highways and freeways as we're going across the country. Okay? Just a little food for thought. Ding. All right. So anyway, we use slang often for just ways to kind of express ourselves. So back in my day, the words, dude, that was sick. I'm embarrassed I'm using these words. That was sick, man. Like, so sick was a word. Bogus, I know, is one. I had another one earlier in my earlier recordings that got deleted. We'll talk about it. Whatever. Anywho, so slang is all kinds of different words that we use to maybe kind of shorten and be lazy to say the thing quickly. Like, I love the way dude is used. I love that dude is synonymous for so many other things. Like, dude, 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 dude. You can use this word and it can mean so many different things. And I love that. And I know that sounds silly, but it's so cool to think one word could say so much. And it's all about the way that you say it. Okay. So now we'll go into other words and other ways in which we will maybe have language. So one of them is opting out. And that's that line, whatever. Whenever you use that word, whatever, dude. Sometimes when I'm in a fight with my husband, he will use whatever. Oh, drives me nuts because what he's doing, he's opting out of the conversation. He's trying to get out of the argument. Whatever. And it's usually when I'm right. I'm just saying. All right. So also think about it when most people speak in cliches or spend very little time speaking honestly. And the reason for this is maybe we don't have the words for it. Maybe we just don't care. Maybe it's just easier. And it's hard to kind of think of new words and new ways of saying things. We have, been in existence a very long time, and language is very old and constantly changing as well. So, that being the case, sometimes just saying the thing that we were going to say, like, I work like a dog, is a lot easier than trying to think of another way of saying, I'm tired. I'm tired, guys. Okay? All right. So, also as a note, college is commonly the last place that people think analytically, unless it's part of their job. It's my job, do it all the time, every day, and I do love it. Though there are times where it gets repetitive. Okay? You can only say the same thing so many different ways. Okay? Or think things or discuss things. Okay? All right. All right, that being the case, let's get into a connotation and denotation. All right, so denotation is a specific object, action, or word that points to or refers to something specific. So a denotation is when I talk about, shaking this little clicker over here. I'm literally shaking this little clicker over here. It is a thing that is pretty concrete. We know what this is. Now, a connotation is something that where images, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, images are associated with a given denotation by an individual or group. So let me explain this a little better. So there is maybe the American flag or something. So the denotation would be the flag itself. We're understanding that the flag is, this symbol or whatever. For my husband and I, we have a connotation towards the, American flag or whatever. So while we can talk about what it is, which is the flag, the denotation, the connotation would be the feelings you have towards said flag. Okay? So connotations of words include their emotional meaning. For some people, when they see the American flag, it is very patriotic. They hold it very true. For some people, when they see the American flag, they're just like, oh, it just, maybe they have a different feeling towards it. Okay? So that's the difference between connotation and denotation. So, as a note, what is the difference between concrete and abstract? This is concrete. I can touch it. I can sniff it. I can lick it. It exists in my hands right here and there. That is concrete. Like, think of concrete. Think of abstract. What's abstract? Oh, it could be anything. Something that is abstract would be like the word love. All right. So the word love, not everyone has the same connotation, not the same feeling towards it. Though denotation says love is this, and there's the description of what we know love to be. But there's also a connotation to it. So what do we understand that to be? For some people, love, they think of, little hearts and little birds. I don't know. I have no idea. For some people, love is a hug. For some people, love is food, right? So everyone has a connotation of what love is to them. That is an abstract term. Hate, to feel sad. Emotions are actually usually the most abstract because everyone has a different feeling for them. Or a connotation is, I say, bird. A bird, we know what a bird to be, but then some of us associate the word bird with maybe a flamingo, a canary, a parakeet, I don't know. So when we think of that, sometimes just the word, the bird is the direct word, but we have a feeling towards what kind of bird are you talking about? Is it that silhouette bird? You see the silhouettes of the birds, or do you actually see an actual bird? Okay, so this is why words matter, because we really need to understand that sometimes words hurt. Okay, while one person might have a connotation towards a word, another person has a completely different connotation, right? A completely different feeling. Somebody might feel very nostalgic towards a word. Another person might feel very angry or hurtful. It might hurt them when they hear this word. Okay, we'll get there in just 1 minute. The first thing to understand is, and this is on our PowerPoint, that there's what a word means and how a word feels. Okay, so someone might be, well, that's not what I mean by this word. It's like, whether or not that's what you mean, this is how it hurts people using this particular word. Okay, so the denotation versus the connotation. The denotation being the word fat, chunky, obese, etc. The connotation is the feelings when you hear the words fat, chunky, obese, all right, etc. How about the denotation of the word house, shack, and mansion? How did you feel when you heard house, shack, or mansion? What did you see? What were these things that came up to you when you hear these words? Same as dog, canine, beast, and puppy. In my mind, all dogs are puppies. That's not true. I think it is. I see a dog, I'm like, oh, little puppy. They're like, it's not a puppy. I'm like, it's a puppy to me. Okay? I have a feeling that the YouTube is going to pause me on that face. I can feel it already. Okay. All right. So people use different connotations consciously. All right. So we'll use different words to give you a feeling on purpose, right? Sometimes we say these things to get an arise or a feeling out of you. Okay. Sometimes if a word is used unconsciously, it can tell you how a person feels. I don't know if you've ever heard Freudian slip. A Freudian slip. Sometimes a word will slip out and someone's like, oh, that was a Freudian slip, meaning you unconsciously said it because you're feeling a certain way. So that's kind of a way of remembering that one. All right. So sometimes the same word can mean different things to different people. All right. For some people, Thanksgiving, ta-da, like, oh, it's nostalgic, it's this, it's Rockwell, everyone's sitting at the table eating turkey, da-da-da. And then there's other people who go, well, let me really tell you about Thanksgiving. And maybe they don't have that Rockwell type of feeling towards it. Maybe they have something else that's a little less, Americana. Maybe something that's more of a they just don't see it the same way, right? Maybe they're like, well, to be honest with you, it's an insult to my culture that there's Thanksgiving because of this reason, okay? So these are just different ways in which we see a word and have different feelings towards it. And it is very important to understand not all people feel the same way, and that's okay. And it's also important when someone has an issue with something to go, oh, I never saw it as that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I see now where you are coming from. So we say this because there's a lot of times in which, for nostalgia's sake, we will continuous throughout society maybe use certain words or certain dialogue or certain things because, well, it doesn't offend me. Stop just a minute. If there is a time when someone brings up something that is ultimately a problem for very many people, and you alone can say, well, I mean, I don't see why it's a problem, then that's because it's not your problem. So you have to take a step back, sit down a little bit, and go, oh, that might be my privilege. I might be privileged in saying it doesn't bother me. Okay, keep that in mind, because if someone's bringing something to your attention, by the time it is brought to your attention, it's something that needs to be addressed. Okay, it's not just nitpicking. It's a point where they have to go, we have to have this conversation. Okay, and just because you don't see a problem with it doesn't mean it's not a problem. It just means you are privileged enough not to have it as a problem. So that being the case, if you're so privileged you can't see that something's an issue, I do suggest taking a step back and go, maybe I should listen first, because it sounds like I don't understand something that maybe I should take a minute and try and understand. It's that simple. That being the case, let's talk really quick about Washington Redskins. Some people who are very nostalgic go, oh, it's always been the Redskins. We got to keep it the Redskins. And it's like, do you guys know what that means? Do you understand why that might be incredibly offensive to some people? Okay? And there's a lot. I have to admit, I'm kind of offended too. I'm not kind of offended. Let me take that back. I am offended. I will take it as, I'm going to make a very direct statement. It is an offensive word, and here's why. The understanding of what redskin means, it's a very derogatory term. It's inappropriate. You know exactly what it is saying, okay? We know exactly what it's saying here. So the issue here is that there's a value conflict. Remember we talked about values, what people value? Some people are valuing the nostalgia of it. It's always been that way. We just leave it that way. Let's just leave it that way. And other people value their heritage and their culture, and they also value, the right to say, hey, man, this is just getting out of hand. This is offensive at this point. I have a right now to stand up for my culture and my beliefs and what I know to be true. And your value of nostalgia, I'm sorry, I think my culture, my cultural values do trump that in some way, right? So I don't know. This is where we have to stop and go, what's more important? The way I feel as a nostalgic, or the way an entire culture feels incredibly oppressed, right? It's time to recognize that and be okay with, these changes. So the value conflict about this is that, language can divide people. For some people, it's just a word. It's not that big of a deal. And some people are like, no, it is a very big deal. We see what you're doing here. Okay. So, this value conflict about language does divide people. In fact, you see that throughout. Apparently, America is so ridiculous that everything divides anybody. Nobody wants to hear what anyone has to say, and everyone's all up in arms. Kind of what it seems like, right? Oh, they're so sensitive. It's like, dude, they do not get it, right? So there's these two sides that are definitely arguing. The question is, what are the arguments these people use? So the question would be, what would be the argument for continuously to use this very racist and derogatory term to define a sports team? So what would be maybe an argument? An argument could say, it's always been this way. Why can't we just keep it? We don't mean for it to be offensive. That would be an argument. And then the other side says, yeah, but it is offensive. And nostalgic or not, it is still offensive. And it was made during a time when there was not this understanding of culture and derogatory racist terms. Okay? So you can see how at some point we do have to go, all right, I see what your point is. Again, because it's not my problem, I don't really feel maybe I should take a step back and kind of see where this is coming from, okay? These are just things to consider. So, another part of this argument might say, if it wasn't Washington Redskins, what if we said Washington Wetbacks or Washington N-words? Now you have a connotation with those words. You're going, ooh, it makes you feel uncomfortable because you're going, all right, that's inappropriate. But then Redskins is okay. So then we have to ask ourselves, all right, where do we draw the line here? Okay? So anyway, this is why language is very important. This is how it becomes very divisive. This is how you can, argue either side. And, then we also, remember we talk about, the role play when we have to go, oh, if it was the other way around, how would I feel? And these are very important things to think when we are making decisions about stuff. How would I feel? We talk, most recently there was the Atlanta shooting, which was very, whatever. And the issue is that a lot of Asian Americans are saying, hey, you're butchering these names. It is important that you say our names, say these names right. Because in a lot of the Asian cultures, you'll see when you go places where obviously their initial, culture came from different names, you'll see someone named Michelle or Jessica or something. And you're like, I imagine that's probably not the name that you were born with. But the Asian cultures will change their name because it's so hard for, English language, English people to speak their language. So they change it to make it more convenient, right? Imagine that. I grew up as a Kylene my whole life. My name was mispronounced over loudspeakers during award ceremonies. My aunt still misspells my name. My God, I don't know how to tell you how old I am, Auntie. Get it right. But to me, that's my identity. And so it hurts me that, that it's not spelled correctly or said correctly. And I imagine, especially in a culture that's very divisive. We're just talking about, Redskins, being in a culture where, you have to change, your name just to fit in, to assimilate. I didn't talk about that in this class. I do in my English 2 class. So I think this is why it's important, especially right now, what we're going through, to really understand why is language so important? Because it is. Because it means something. Because it can hurt people. It can help people too, but it can also really hurt. So we do have to be mindful of that. So keep in mind, it also depends on who you're with, what community you're in, what kind of dialogue you're using, because some words can be highly negotiated depending on the context. Okay, so we have to think about, where are we? Read the room, y'all. Read the room. And who's your community? Who are you talking amongst and who are you with? Also keep in mind, sometimes it's just inappropriate to say inappropriate things. All right, so we do have to think about that. So if you were in my English 2 class, we actually do cover in a poem some dialogue that most people are like, "Ooh, how can you say that?" And it's like, well, it's within the community. It's within this authors or the writers. Actually, I wouldn't say the writer because you're not supposed to. The artist and the art are not supposed to be intermingled, but the art itself uses the language because it is for that particular community. Anyway, so let me keep going on this and maybe make a little more sense. So say we're using the word, the words woman, girl, chick, lady. All right, excuse me, lady. Like, oh, excuse, or excuse me, chick. I don't know. I'm trying to think of ways like when you would use this dialogue, you're like, at what point, can we negotiate that it's appropriate to use these words? Oh, that chick over there. Okay, we can say that some, communications, you can say that's all right. That woman over there, that lady, that girl. So notice how sometimes some of these words have different connotations to it. Also the words homo, gay, fag, and queer. For some people, they're like, well, you're not allowed to use those words, and other people are like, that's my word. That's my community. This is the way we talk to ourselves and amongst ourselves. So there's a way in which you can highly negotiate these words that you can make it appropriate. But it is very important to be mindful of the usage of these words and the ways in which we use it. I believe Will and Grace will use the word fag hag, and that's their way of describing Grace because she's always with the guys, and they're out at gay bars and stuff. And so that was their label to her. And their small group in their community, it's understood that she goes, yeah, that's what I am, and this is what we call it. And I think any other place, it depends on, again, how you're using it. Is it appropriate? we must be mindful. It's very important to be mindful in the ways in which we have communications, dialogue, and language, especially when we're trying to understand other cultures and other communities. Okay? All right, so other ways in which we might have a connotation or a denotation of certain words would be breasts. All right, so we talk about boobs, tits, breasts, honkers. I don't know. I don't know why I had to put that up there. But right, so every single one of us has a different connotation for each one of those words, okay? And this is just how we communicate. This is how we discuss what it is we're trying to talk about, okay? All right. So that being the case, keep in mind that ads and politicians love to manipulate us with connotations. How does it make us feel? Okay? So think about when we're grocery shopping, okay? And you go to get milk and you read it and it says low fat. You're like, oh, low fat. It's organic. It's 1%. There was calcium added. I noticed that orange juice has a lot of calcium added. And I'm like, I never liked that. It always tastes like, like you're chewing on something when you have that. Anyway, so I actually avoid orange juice that says calcium added because I'm like, it's just going to taste like rocks or whatever. All right. And then we also think of things that might have like hormone free. So we use these connotations and these certain ways of, these certain words to help us understand or help us to decide what it is we are going to purchase. Okay. I'm trying to think of something. What else? Milk's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, so we also have that people can lie to themselves with language. So sometimes we lie to ourselves about the things that we do. One of them would be like downloading and streaming and torrenting and file sharing and things like that. But the reality is it's stealing. LimeWire, I don't know if I'm aging myself on this. LimeWire was one that I grew up on. Oh, sorry. We were always downloading music and stuff. So to me, I was like, I'm just downloading music. It's like, actually, you're stealing music off the internet. Did it stop me? No. Do I keep doing it? Probably. Okay. All right. So again, certain words like we use, again, language to lie to ourselves when we think about maybe the immigration debate. We would say undocumented workers, illegal aliens, immigrants, asylum workers. These are just different ways that we're using these words, to kind of either make, excuses or to, explain ourselves, whichever side you're on. You could use either side. That's just what we do, okay? How about the fact that I use the word plagiarism when you don't quote exact words in the book or online or whatever drives me crazy because it is plagiarism. You're literally stealing the words of somebody else but not giving them credit. So the reason why I always push really hard for MLA in quotes is one, it just helps us, like when we talk about grammar, so I know what's going on here, and also you give credit where credit is due because I know you would want it too. Okay. All right. So let's talk about reification because language is very important, as I keep reiterating over and over again. So the new word here, reification, is a process by which words become more powerful and real than the object reality. Okay, you might be going, what? Let me explain that to you. So you're at the grocery store and you see a box of Pop-Tarts and then you see a box of toaster pastries. Which one do you lean towards? Pop-Tarts. Okay. I mean, unless you're frugal like me, I'm like, I don't know, whatever it costs less. I don't care. Okay. So sometimes the reification makes us think about a product because it has a name to it. So you're in a grocery store and you see Pepsi and Cola, or you lean towards Pepsi. So here's a question for you. When you go to give someone a soda and it's a brown soda and you pour it, you're like, oh, here's some Coke, here's some Pepsi, or do you say, here's some cola? Majority of the time, you reificate, I guess that was how you would say it, reification, where the item itself becomes